My name is Latasha Amara Cole, and I'm 30. This Christmas was supposed to be easy for once. By the first week of December, I'd wrapped everything. A scarf in my mother's shade of winter rose, a toolkit my dad kept meaning to buy, a Lego set for my niece who loved the sound of breaking rules more than following instructions, and a stack of books Jacob swore his boys would never put down. I even bought extra because somebody always brings an unexpected guest and calls it fate. Snow hissed under my tires when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house glowed with the smug confidence of 1,000 white lights. I balanced 2 canvas bags of gifts, nudged the doorbell with my elbow, and felt, for the first time in a long time, like the ache in this family might be manageable. The door opened a sliver. Mom's perfume arrived first, then her pearls, then her eyes, cool as the porch air. "We don't want you here this year." I laughed, a short, shocked sound that broke in the middle. "What?" From the hallway, Jacob's voice sauntered out, like it owned the place. "This is no place for losers." Dad hovered behind them, studying a geometric pattern on the hardwood floor that only he could see. Kelly sat on the arm of the couch, palms pressed flat to her knees, face politely blank, the way you get when you've practiced being invisible. The stirring in my chest went tight and hot, and then strangely clear. I nodded once, like we were discussing weather. "Okay." I turned, stepped off the porch, and let the screen door sigh close behind me. The bags thumped into the passenger seat. Ribbon ends stuck out like frayed nerves. I stared at the house, then at my hands. I could leave. I could also choose not to. The cold bit the edges of my ears. I set the keys down and walked back to the door. I didn't knock. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping into a foyer that smelled like cinnamon and performance. "Why am I not welcome at Christmas? What did I do?" Jacob didn't bother looking up from his phone. "You really don't get it, do you? You've been slacking off. The kids barely got anything from you this year." My head tilted. "There are 2 bags of gifts in the car with their names on every single tag. Last year you did more." He leaned back, hooked an ankle over his knee like he was teaching a masterclass in entitlement. "This year it's like you don't care. It's embarrassing for us, honestly." I turned to my parents, expecting someone to remember my childhood face. Mom offered a brittle smile. "But you just bought a new car, sweetheart. You found money for that." "The car's on credit," I said evenly. "And even if it wasn't, how does buying a car make me responsible for Jacob's kids? They're not my responsibility." "You're the one with money," Jacob said. "We're family. Families help. You always have." I glanced at Kelly. A flush had climbed her neck. She stared at the coffee table like it might crack open and swallow her. "So because I've been generous," I said, "I'm now obligated forever. And if I draw a line, I'm a loser." Jacob shrugged, "If the shoe fits." The words landed like a dare. I felt the old reflex, to patch, to pay, to smooth the water everyone else churned, rise in my throat and then fall away like a wave finally remembering it could retreat. "You know what?" I said, voice steady. "You're right. I don't belong here." I looked at my parents. "Enjoy your Christmas." Then at Jacob. "Good luck with the presents, because this loser is done financing your life." The night air slapped my cheeks as I left. The house hummed behind me as if nothing had shifted, but something had, clean and irreversible. I slid into the driver's seat and let my hands settle on the wheel. A thin thread of grief pulled across my ribs, then loosened. At home, the quiet met me like a decision. I placed the gifts on my dining table and stood there long enough for the room to accept me. The phone buzzed. Evan, my boyfriend, had texted an hour ago. "Got you that gingerbread kit. Come over? Or I come there." I sent a quick, "Later, family thing," then added, "I'm okay." He replied with a heart and the cookie emoji, his way of telling me he'd keep the porch light of his patience on. Evan didn't come with demands. He came with steadiness. It scared me sometimes, how simple good could feel. I poured tea I didn't want and watched steam ghost the window. The kitchen clock clicked like a metronome for a song I didn't know. The more I thought, the clearer it got. This wasn't about one Christmas. It was about a decade of just this once that became always. When Jacob and Kelly first married, money slipped through their fingers like water. He switched jobs the way wind changes direction. She stitched together part-time hours around childcare. I stepped in, thinking it was a bridge. School supplies, camp fees. The month the mortgage stalked them like a storm. Then the bridge became a road, and the road was paved with my yes. I said yes to keep their kids from feeling shortage. I said yes because I knew what it cost a child to carry adult panic. But a strange arithmetic crept in. Gratitude decayed into expectation and then into title, the one who will. I had signed my name to a job I never applied for. The next morning, light pooled across the floor like mercy. I woke with a decision lodged in my bones. No more, not from anger, from clarity. Evan came by with coffee and a question in his eyes. You sure you're okay? I'm sure, I said, and I'm done. Done? How? Funding Jacob's life. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't list all the times he'd watched me wire money, skip weekends away, or pretend a drained account was fine. He set the coffee down and took my hand. Boundaries, he said softly. I like this version of you. I exhaled. I'm scared I'm going to lose them. You already lost them, he said. They just announced it on the porch. I almost smiled. Maya would have a field day with this. His mouth quirks. He knows I don't love mentioning his ex. She'd write a 1,000-word essay about your rescuer complex and send it to me with footnotes. Would she be wrong? I asked. He squeezed my fingers. You help people. That's not a flaw. Let's just make sure you help you too. We stacked the gifts in the hall closet. I taped a note inside the door. Hold. Decide with a calm head. It felt like leaving myself a breadcrumb trail back to sense. No one called on Christmas. New Year's Eve came and went, a quiet loop of movies and takeout and the soft domesticity I'd once judged and now craved. At midnight, Evan kissed me like we weren't promising anything we didn't intend to keep. The phone stayed dark. It stung, then it didn't. Absence can be a balm when presence is a wound. On January 3rd, a text pinged from Kelly. I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't agree. Jacob wouldn't hear me. My thumb hovered. Thank you, I typed back, then erased it. I tried again. I appreciate the message. I can't go back to how it was. She replied with a single dot, like she had more to say but didn't know how to say it without tearing something irreparable. 2 weeks later, Jacob knocked during a Zoom call. He didn't stop until the dog downstairs started protesting on my behalf. I opened the door because ignoring a pounding doesn't make the pounding end. We need to talk, he said, pushing past the frame like the house had never learned my name. No, I said, standing where I was. We don't. You need to stop acting like this and start helping again. He looked worse up close, sleep-deprived, thinning patience, pinched between his eyebrows. I blinked. Helping, meaning pay your bills. You're the one with money. Do you know how hard it's been since you decided to pull this stunt? The kids barely have what they need. Kelly's struggling. We can't do this without you. The old ache knocked, asking to be let in. I didn't open the door. You're a grown man with a family. If you need more money, you need to earn it. It's not my job to solve your life. You always helped before. And I taught you that I would, I said. That's on me. This, now, is me unteaching it. He scoffed. Selfish. Selfish is lying to our parents about me, turning them against me, banning me from Christmas because I didn't spend enough on your kids, and then showing up here to demand more. I took a breath. We're done. I won't be an ATM with a heartbeat. He glared, heat looking for kindling. When it didn't find any, he stormed down the hall, trailing grievance like a scarf. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it until my pulse smoothed out. Evan texted from the street. I'm outside. Want to walk? I grabbed my coat and met him in the honest cold. The next night, my phone lit with a number I didn't know. Is this Latasha Cole? A man asked, the syllables crisp. Yes. This is Mark Dawson. I'm an attorney. I represent a client concerned about certain financial matters involving your family. Would you have a moment to discuss? I looked at the ceiling. I looked at everything I had kept. Yes, I said, and sat down. Mark Dawson's office sat 12 floors above a street that smelled like wet paper and hot pretzels. The lobby security guard made me sign in like I might steal a fern. I rode the elevator with a woman in winter white and a man lecturing someone invisible about KPIs. The doors opened on glass, quiet carpet, and the kind of framed degrees that announce, "Here, truth wears a tie." Mark stood when I entered. Mid-40s, kind eyes behind precise glasses. He shook my hand like mine had value. Ms. Cole, thank you for coming. It's Latasha, I said, because I needed to sound like a person and not a case file. We sat. He folded his fingers, then unfolded them. The client I represent is Kelly. The name landed like a soft drop that still made ripples. Kelly, as in my sister-in-law? Yes. He He slid a folder across the desk. She asked me to show you what she found. I opened it. Photocopies, screenshots, ledger lines marching like soldiers. My transfers to Jacob matched against his withdrawals. Same days, sometimes the same hour. Money flowed out as quickly as it flowed in, into a separate account I'd never seen. A debit string to an online sports book. A sleek restaurant receipt for two when he told me he couldn't afford the kids' winter coats. 2 nights at a hotel with a lobby I recognized from a city influencer's feed. The room tilted in that way grief does, quietly but entirely. So while I was paying for school supplies, I said, he was buying filet mignon and betting the over-under. Mark didn't soften the edges. Based on what we've reviewed, yes. I stared at a line of numbers until they meant nothing. Is she safe? She's focused on the children, he said carefully, on securing stability. She didn't come to weaponize you. She came because she felt gaslit by the ledgers in her own house. She wanted you to know so you wouldn't be manipulated further. My throat tightened with something that wasn't quite tears. Relief has its own ache. What does she want me to do? Right now, nothing. She's documenting. If Jacob escalates, she'll consider separation or other legal steps. She understands you've been generous. She does not expect more. The old reflex rose again. How can I fix this? Then met the newer one. You cannot fix what isn't yours. I closed the folder. Please tell her I saw it, and that I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. He nodded. There is one more thing, he said, sliding a smaller envelope across. Printouts of emails Jacob sent to a payday lender, using you as an informal guarantor, name only. We've already sent notices to remove you. I wanted you to know. Anger came then, but it was cool, crystalline. Thank you for telling me. When I stepped back onto the street, the winter light seemed too honest for the day. I sent Evan a single text. Confirmed. He replied in under a minute. Meet me at the park? He was there on the bench by the pond, hands shoved in his coat pockets, cheeks flushed from cold. He stood. What happened? I told him, not with drama, but with facts. The hidden account, the gambling, the hotels, the lender. He listened the way you watch someone cross a narrow bridge. Attention, silence, ready if needed. Say the part you're not saying, he said when I finished. I feel stupid. The words left a metallic taste, like I funded the problem I swore I was solving. You funded your love for your nieces and nephews, he said. Jacob abused that. There's a difference. I exhaled, breath a small cloud. Kelly hired the lawyer. That tracks. She's been quiet to survive. Quiet isn't the same as complicit. We walked a loop past a kid teaching a smaller kid how to throw snow that doesn't stick. My phone rang. Jacob. I almost ignored it. Evan tilted his head. Pick it up if it helps you close the door. I did. What do you want? You talked to Kelly, didn't you? He snapped. His voice had that hollow, stretched sound of a man sprinting from consequences. You're poisoning her against me. I didn't have to, I said. Your bank statements did that. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you took my money under the word emergency and turned it into bets and dinners and hotels. I know you lied to your wife and used my name in an email to a lender, which a lawyer has already reversed, so don't try it again. You would throw your own family under the bus? He sounded genuinely offended, like morality owed him rent. I'm stepping off the bus you've been driving toward a cliff, I said. We're done. No more money, no more lies. Fix your life. You'll regret this, he said, and hung up, as if threat was a currency accepted everywhere. We let the silence sit. A dog bounded past, ecstatic in the useless snow. Evan slid his gloved hand into mine. Proud of you, he murmured. That night, Kelly called. Her voice had the tremble of someone holding a door closed with her whole body. Did you see? I did. I'm sorry, she said, and the apology sounded like a confession. I should have said something sooner. I was scared. I didn't want to be the one who broke the family. You didn't break it, I said. You're trying to stop the breaking. She breathed out a laugh that died in the middle. He admitted some of it, said the account was for unexpected expenses. He said the hotel was for a conference. He said I'm dramatic. You are not dramatic, I said. You are strategic. What do you need? A long pause. Space. A plan. I'm getting documents together, birth certificates, school records. I found a rental 2 towns over with a month-to-month lease. I can't keep the kids in a house where every day is a new lie. If you need help, hovered on my tongue, the old bridge trying to rebuild itself. I chose my words like I was selecting stones across a river. I can help with a deposit, short term, Under one condition. The help is for you and the kids, not for Jacob by proxy. Understood, she whispered. I won't tell him anything. Not about you, not about the lawyer, not about the plan. Good. Document everything. Send me copies. If he rages, record. If he calms, record that too. You sound like Mark, she said. And for a second, we almost smiled together. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling and felt the shape of the next few weeks pressing forward. Boxes, paperwork, accusations, the small logistics of survival that women master because they must. Evan lay beside me and traced a line on my wrist with his finger, like he was writing a sentence I needed to remember. You are allowed to protect yourself while protecting others. Maya's voice flitted through my head, her academic tone calling it differentiation, and for once, I didn't resent the echo. Boundaries were not barbed wire. They were a map. Days slid into a rhythm of work, lists, and quiet vigilance. I saved every text. I labeled every screenshot. I set up a separate email folder titled Receipts and another titled Peace with Photos of the Pond, Evan's lopsided gingerbread house, a note I'd written to myself. You are not a wallet. You are a woman with a life. Jacob tried a new angle. Group text to the family. Half pleas, half performances. Latasha cut us off in the dead of winter. The kids are suffering because of her pride. Mom responded with sanctimony wrapped in concern. Dad sent a single, let's talk privately, which in our house had always meant, let's not talk at all. Isla DM'd me screenshots from the cousin chat with a single caption. I'm on your side. 3 blue hearts. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until my shoulders lowered an inch. On a Wednesday thick with gray, my phone buzzed. Kelly. We're leaving today. My heart kicked. I called. She whispered from a closet where she hid to talk. He's on a business trip. I think it's a casino run. The truck is packed. The landlord knows. I have copies of everything. I told the school we're transferring. They promised discretion. Text me the address, I said. I'll Zelle the deposit in first month. Will you be safe driving? My neighbor's brother is coming to help. He's quiet. He doesn't ask questions. Good. Leave the house key on the counter. Take the kids' favorite things. Let the rest be dead weight. If he shows up, call 911, then call me. She swallowed. Thank you. For what? For believing me. For not making me feel crazy. You're not crazy, I said. You're brave. After we hung up, I sent the money with a subject line that made me oddly proud. For stability, not rescue. Evan read it over my shoulder and kissed the back of my head. That's a good line. By dusk, a final photo arrived. 2 kids asleep on a pile of blankets in a new living room, boxes stacked like battlements, a paper plate dinner on the floor, and Kelly's bare feet just visible at the edge of the frame. The caption, We're okay. I saved it in the peace folder. Predictably, the next afternoon Jacob called, voice ragged and furious. You turned her against me. You ruined my family. You did that, I said. Go to a meeting. Call a counselor. Leave me out of your equation. You think you're better than me now? I think I'm done being worse to myself than you are, I said, and ended the call. The world did not end. The sky did not split. I made dinner. Evan washed dishes with a ridiculous playlist that somehow made grief feel less gothic. Later, I printed the lawyer's folder and slid it into a fireproof bag with my passport and the title to my car. Not paranoia, preparation. Before sleep, I stood at the window and watched a lone streetlight dust the block in yellow. For once, no one needed me urgently. For once, I had chosen the calm and been allowed to keep it. A text pinged. Dad, dinner this Friday? Just us. Another. Mom, we should reconsider Christmas traditions. Call me. I placed the first on my calendar. I archived the second. My life, newly, answered to me. Friday night, Dad's new apartment smelled like garlic bread and second chances. The place was small, 1 bedroom, above a laundromat, but he'd strung white lights across the kitchen window, and for the first time in years, he looked like he owned his own air. Spaghetti, he said, setting down a steaming bowl. Don't laugh. It's all I know how to cook. Megan and I sat at the chipped table, trading weary glances. She twirled noodles, then finally whispered, I almost called him last week. Almost went back. Dad's fork clinked against his plate. Don't. Not until he chooses help over excuses. He hasn't earned your call. The words startled me. Dad had been silent wallpaper for decades, letting Mom's voice dominate every room. Now, he sounded like a man who'd decided quiet was no longer survival. I should have spoken up years ago, he said. Your mother built a story where Jacob was the prodigy, you two were support characters, and she was the director. I let her do it. I thought silence was peace. It wasn't. It was rot. Megan reached across the table and squeezed his wrist. I just nodded, storing his words like proof that change, however late, was still possible. But not everyone was changing. 2 nights later, my phone lit up. Mom! I let it ring twice before answering. Latasha, she began, voice dripping with practiced grief. I hope you're happy. Kelly's left. Jacob is shattered. Do you feel proud, inserting yourself where you don't belong? I stared at the ceiling. Mom, Kelly hired a lawyer. She found the hidden accounts. This isn't about me. Kelly is confused, and you, her voice sharpened. You've always been jealous, always wanted to tear down your brother. I almost laughed. Jealous of debt, of lies, of gambling receipts? Silence. Then colder. Blood is blood. One day you'll regret betraying your own. She hung up before I could answer. I sat there, hand trembling, until Evan walked in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. Let me guess, he said, sliding one toward me. She made herself the victim? I managed a bitter smile. She always does. Then you need to decide, he said gently, how many more times you're willing to pick up a phone that only cuts you. Kelly's texts came sporadically, updates wrapped in exhaustion. The kids started their new school today. A lawyer says separation papers are in motion. I found a job at a clinic. It's not much, but it's steady. Each message felt like a lifeline tossed across states. I replied with encouragement, money for the deposit, a promise that she wasn't alone. But I kept my boundaries clear. No funneling funds back to Jacob, no loopholes. Evan noticed the way I clenched my jaw whenever her name popped up. You're allowed to help, he said one night. Just don't rebuild the bridge Jacob burned. I know, I said. This is for her and the kids, not for him. Jacob didn't see it that way. He called again, this time past midnight, voice hoarse with fury. You've destroyed me. She's gone. The kids are gone. And it's your fault. I sat up in bed, Evan steady beside me. No, Jacob. They're gone because you made home a war zone. You think you're some hero? You're a parasite, living off your job while pretending you're better. I'm not pretending, I said, voice low but firm. I am better, because I don't gamble my rent away, because I don't lie to my wife, because I don't call my sister at midnight to scream instead of to apologize. He cursed, spat promises of revenge, then hung up. Evan wrapped an arm around me. He's unraveling. That's not your burden to carry. I leaned against him, letting the truth of that sentence soak deeper than any insult Jacob had thrown. 2 days later, Isla texted me a screenshot from the cousin chat. Jacob ranting about fake evidence and traitors. Most cousins stayed silent. One wrote simply, Dude, we saw the bank records. Stop. I saved the image. Evidence wasn't just paper, it was the chorus of people finally refusing to clap for the act. Then came the text that shifted everything. Kelly, we're leaving today. I called immediately. She answered in a whisper, kids' laughter faint behind her. He's out of town. Casino, probably. I packed everything that matters. We're driving tonight. Do you have the lease? Yes, month to month. The landlord knows the situation. What about money? A pause. I hate to ask, but don't apologize, I cut in. I'll cover the first month, but remember, this isn't rescue. This is runway. You have to take off on your own. Her breath caught. Thank you. By dusk, a final message arrived. A photo of her children asleep on blankets in a bare living room, cardboard boxes stacked like fortresses. Caption: We're okay. I saved it to a folder I'd labeled Peace. Jacob's meltdown wasn't long in coming. You helped her leave, he shouted when he called 2 days later. You've ruined my life. Jacob, I said, calm now. Ruin is what happens when lies collect interest. Pay your debt. I hung up before he could reply. The silence afterward wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. Dad invited me to dinner again the next week. Megan joined, and together we laughed at nothing, talked about books, and listened to Dad's new stories of burnt garlic bread and stubborn laundry machines. For once, family didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like rebuilding. But I knew the war wasn't over. Jacob wouldn't vanish quietly. Mom wouldn't surrender her narrative. And in the shadows of ledgers and investors, I could still feel something larger waiting, a thread that hadn't been fully pulled. Hila's last message echoed in my head. There's always another copy. The USB, the accounts, the deals, pieces I hadn't yet seen. And I had a feeling that when they surfaced, they wouldn't just rewrite Jacob's story. They might rewrite all of ours. February came in with brittle cold and the kind of silence that feels staged. Jacob had gone unusually quiet. No calls, no texts, no middle-of-the-night rants. For a moment I thought maybe Kelly's leaving had stunned him into stillness. But stillness, I've learned, is rarely peace. It's usually pressure building behind a dam. I found out where the cracks were forming one Sunday afternoon. Evan and I were walking back from the market, laughing about how he'd convinced the cashier to throw in extra parsley for dramatic effect, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Ms. Cole?" The voice was clipped, professional. "This is Detective Harris with the County Police Department. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding some financial complaints filed by your brother, Jacob Cole." My chest tightened. "Complaints?" "Yes. He claims significant sums of money were loaned under coercion, and that you threatened retaliation if he didn't comply." Evan stopped walking when he saw my face. "She didn't," he said loudly, even though the officer couldn't hear. I steadied my voice. "Detective, I have 3 years of receipts, bank transfers, and messages where I was the one giving, without demand. I can bring them in tomorrow." "Please do," the detective replied. "We'll need copies." When the call ended, Evan cursed under his breath. "He's trying to flip the script." I nodded, throat dry. But this time, I'm ready. At the station the next morning, I laid everything on the table. Bank records, screenshots, timestamps, even the message thread where Jacob begged for rent money with emojis like they were legal tender. The detective flipped through it all, expression neutral. "This paints a very different picture," he said finally. "Thank you, Ms. Cole. We'll be closing this out." Walking out, the winter air hit my lungs like absolution. Evan squeezed my shoulder. "You didn't just defend yourself. You shut a door he can't pry open anymore." But deep down, I knew Jacob wasn't done. The next crack came from Mom. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, bundled in her fur-trimmed coat, pearls still perfect. "Latasha," she said, eyes glossy, "how could you side with outsiders against your own blood?" "Mom," I said evenly, "Kelly isn't an outsider. She's family, and she's protecting her kids." "She's ruining Jacob," Mom snapped. "He's fragile. You know that. He needs us." "He needs accountability," I corrected, "not cover." Her lips thinned. "Your father's weak, Megan's disloyal, and you," her voice cracked, "you've become cruel." "No," I said softly. "I've become clear." She left without another word, heels clicking down the hall like punctuation. A week later, Kelly called from her new place. Her voice was steadier, but I could hear exhaustion in every syllable. "I filed the papers," she said. "Separation, custody, everything. The lawyer says it'll hold." "I'm proud of you," I told her. "How are the kids?" "Better," she said, and I could hear one of them laughing in the background. "They don't ask about him as much anymore. They just breathe easier." I closed my eyes, picturing that living room with boxes now half unpacked, the faint sound of cartoons on the TV. A home built from rubble, but a home nonetheless. Jacob didn't call me again, but his presence leaked through in other ways. Isla sent me screenshots from family chat, long rants about how ungrateful women had conspired against him, how he'd been robbed of his legacy. Most cousins ignored him. A few told him to get help, and tucked in the middle was a message from Dad. "Son, stop." We all saw the truth. That line almost broke me, not because of Jacob, but because Dad had finally chosen truth over silence. Then, late one night, a package slid under my door. No return address. Just a plain envelope. Inside, a USB stick, identical to the one Grandpa had plugged in at Megan's wedding. A note in block letters. "Copy 3. Keep safe." I stared at it, pulse thudding. Someone, maybe Grandpa, maybe Isla, maybe even Kelly, wanted me to have this. Proof. Evidence. Insurance. Evan found me holding it in the dim kitchen light. "Huh, another one?" "Yeah," I whispered. "And if there's a third, there might be more." He looked at me carefully. "Do you want to know what's on it?" "Yes," I said, "but not tonight. Tonight I just want to sleep without fire alarms in my chest." He pulled me close. "Then that's what we'll do." The next morning, as the sun bled pale across the blinds, I slid the USB into my laptop. Folders popped up. Bank transfers. Contracts. A spreadsheet labeled Investors. Pending. Names I didn't recognize. Amounts too large to be Jacob's alone. And at the bottom, initials I did recognize, MC. My mother's. The screen seemed to hum. My breath caught. Jacob's gambling wasn't the only secret. Mom was in it too. And suddenly I realized the dam hadn't cracked. It was breaking. The spreadsheet glowed in the half-light of morning, each line a match waiting to catch, transfers in amounts that dwarfed anything Jacob could have touched, dates overlapping his emergencies, and at the bottom, initials carved into digital stone, MC. I whispered it out loud, as if hearing the syllables would make them less impossible. Mom! Evan leaned over my shoulder. That's her? I nodded. Margaret Cole, her exact initials. She's not just covering for him, she's tied in. The kitchen felt smaller, walls bending inward. For years, I thought Mom's control was about pride, about keeping appearances polished like her pearls. But this was money. Quiet deals, a web spun behind every Sunday dinner and Christmas fight. I drove to Dad's that evening. He was sitting on the balcony with a blanket over his knees, city lights flickering like restless thoughts. I handed him the USB. He slid on his glasses, brows furrowing as the files opened. He scrolled slowly, then stopped, staring at the initials. His hands trembled against the mouse. I knew she was hiding things, he said quietly. I didn't know she was this far in. I sat beside him. How long? He shook his head. Too long. She kept separate accounts. I never asked. I thought silence was love. Turns out silence was cover. His eyes found mine. You need to protect yourself, Latasha. If this surfaces, she'll drag you down with her. She'll say you planted it, or that Jacob gave it to you to frame her. She'll do anything to keep control. 2 nights later, Megan called. Her voice carried both fear and fury. Mom cornered me after work. Said you were feeding Dad lies. Said you forged documents to make her look guilty. I clenched the phone. Megan, listen to me. The evidence came from Grandpa, or Ela. Someone trusted. I didn't create it. I just opened it. Megan was silent for a beat. I believe you, but she's unraveling. She's saying Jacob was set up, that the whole family's against her. I think she knew all along about the gambling, maybe even funded it. The words sank heavy. Mom hadn't just protected Jacob out of blind maternal love. She had stakes. She had skin in the game. Kelly called next. Her voice was steadier now, but shadowed. The kids are safe. We're adjusting. But Jacob's spiraling. He found me online somehow, left comments about betrayal, about how everyone will regret this. I blocked him, but be careful. Her warning echoed through me. Jacob was dangerous in his recklessness. Mom was dangerous in her precision. Together they could torch the ground under all of us. The final confrontation came a week later. Mom invited me to talk at her house, the same porch where she once barred me from Christmas. I almost didn't go. Evan told me not to, but some wars don't let you choose the battlefield. She was waiting in the kitchen, pearls shining against her throat like armor. Jacob sat at the counter, eyes bloodshot, leg jittering. You've gone too far, Latasha, Mom said, voice calm, rehearsed. These fabrications you've been spreading are dangerous. They're not fabrications, I said, sliding the USB across the counter. They're your files, your initials, your investments. Her smile froze. Jacob's eyes darted to her, then to me. She's lying, Mom snapped. You planted that. No, I said softly. You did, years ago, and now it's catching up. For the first time, Jacob didn't defend her. He just stared, realization slowly draining the fight from his face. Mom slammed her hand on the counter. You'll destroy this family. I met her eyes. You already did. In the weeks that followed, the house of cards collapsed. Dad filed for divorce. Megan cut contact entirely. Kelly finalized separation. Jacob disappeared into silence, his phone finally dark. And Mom, she doubled down, rewriting the story to anyone who'd listen. But fewer and fewer did. The documents spoke louder. Grandpa's quiet nod spoke louder. The absence of defense from Dad spoke louder still. One evening, Evan and I sat on the couch, my laptop closed, the weight of it no longer pressing me into the cushions. You did it, he said, brushing his thumb against my hand. No, I corrected. I just stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Family dinners now are small. Megan brings wine. Dad burns garlic bread. Kelly visits with the kids who laugh louder than the ghosts we left behind. There's no perfect bow on top. There are scars. But there's also air. I keep the USB in a fireproof box, labeled simply, Truth. Not to weaponize, but to remind myself. Because the lesson I carved out of all this is simple. Blood is not a free pass. Love is not silence. And boundaries, those are the only inheritance worth passing on. For the first time in years, I am not the screw-up. I am the one who walked away and survived.